Look at how pretty. So I've had this side table that I built a few years ago, and it kind of sucks. I mean, it's kind of pretty, but it kind of sucks. And I've been wanting to make a new one. And the other day I was at the wood shop and I found some beautiful Brazilian hickory? There's no way to tell. So the plan today is kind of to fumble my way through making a new side table and just have some fun being back in the shop again.
So the plan and design for this build is pretty simple. I really like the style of the original side table that I have. It functions, it works, but there's a few things that I want to change about it. So I made a quick sketch in Shaper 3D to figure out the size and dimensions that I wanted, and then I couldn't pick whether I wanted square legs or round. It was a very tough call, but in the end, decided that square legs with like a nice tiny little round over would be the perfect look that I was going for. And I also decided to add a third shelf at the very bottom because it just made sense. Why not? So with my shelves all cut out, the next thing to do is deal with this little bit of a wobble situation. Now, I don't have a jointer, and if I had a jointer that was wide enough, I'd be able just to run these boards over it and boom, flat face, away we go. But that's not the case. Flat face, not the case. So the easiest process that I've found to flatten out these boards is using my thickness planer and a planer sled, which is just a flat piece of MDF that I can shim up these boards and glue them in place. So with a few pencil lines drawn on top, I'll know exactly when this board is now flush and flat on the top surface. And the next step to do is square up my edge. And to do that, I'll be using my trusty track saw. That's because I don't have a jointer, remember? Remember how I said earlier that I don't have a jointer? Usually you'd use a jointer, but I don't have one. So, track saw it is. And guess what? It actually gives a perfect 90 as long as you are putting the track on the flat side that you just planed. Yeah, shocker. So with one flat face and one square edge, the next thing to do was set up my table saw at a healthy 8 inches. Healthy 8. It's a good size for a shelf width, right? That's what we're doing here. We're setting the width of our shelves to a healthy 8 inches. Or so I thought.
Huh, so maybe we're not going 8. Oh, don't look at my butt. 7 3/4? Yeah. Sheet. So the problem with like highly figured patterned wood, I don't want to make a panel because it's going to look silly. There's going to be a line, it's not going to match. Don't like it. But I don't want to go smaller either. What do I do?
So after a lot of thought, contemplation, and some humming and hawing, I decided that we're just going to go smaller. And that's the way it's going to be. So I chopped my boards down to about 7 5/8. I think eventually they end up at 7.5. So we're just going to go with 7.5. It's a good size. Trust me, it's an excellent size, in fact. It's kind of the perfect size, actually, for a side table. You don't need 8 inches. That's just too big. I've decided 8 is too big. So any of you out there with an 8-inch wide side table, who are you trying to impress, huh? So with my boards now at the perfect 7.5-inch width, I had one more face to take care of to finish squaring up these boards. Don't ask what I'm doing here. It's scientific, I promise.
So I got my 3 boards cut down. Oh! This one's just the prettiest. So it is going to be the top. And then this one will be the middle. And then this one will be the bottom. Oh man, they're heavy. I'll mark these up. And legs. It's just how that is going to be. So also at the beginning, do you remember when I said I think I'm gonna fumble through this? Fumble my way through, yeah, already did that. I cut these to be just over 24 inches, but that's my overall length. What I had intended to do was leave them about 2 inches long and chop the end, flip it, book match it, so it actually looks like 2-inch material. Yeah, that didn't happen. Just figure this out.
So yeah, I definitely made a little bit of a mistake on the book matched end thingamadoo, but that's going to be a future Hugh problem, and current Hugh is going to start making some legs. Gotta show off them legs. So I milled up this other piece of Brazilian hickory the same way I did the shelves, and the plan for the legs is to glue 2 pieces together and try and book match these, at least on 3 of the 4 legs, because board widths, and I didn't buy enough wood. So buy more wood. The more wood, the merrier. Now that the legs are gluing up and curing away, next thing to do is make these shelves actually look like they're 2 inches thick. Kind of. So to do that, I squared up all of my shelf edges and I just started ripping down, or actually cross-cutting a whole bunch of 2-inch wide strips so that I could glue them on the bottom of my shelves. And for anyone who's wondering about the look I was originally going for, this is it. This is what I would have liked to have seen, but oh well.
That doesn't matter. Moving on.
So with my edge pieces all glued on and in place, I let them cure up for about half an hour, and then I started working on the side rails for the underneath of these shelves. So with a quick little haircut on one side and a nice little trim on the other, I could get these side rails fit into place and glued on down. Now that my shelves are gluing up and doing their thing, it was time to jump back over to the legs because they were all cured up. So first thing I did was grab Herbert, my trusty handy-dandy SurfPrep sander. And if you've been around for a little while, you'll know that he used to have googly eyes, but they kind of keep falling off. So right now he's just blind, and it's okay. Don't worry about it. He can still see. It's fine. It's fine. Now with all the glue squeeze out taken care of by sanding and my table saw, the last thing to do was square these up to my final width of 1.5 inches. So with a quick rip through the table saw and a little more sanding, my legs were good to go to figure out how I wanted to actually lay this out. Because at this point I still didn't know how I was going to attach my legs.
I think this one's my favorite.
So this is where everything started to go horribly wrong. And not with the build, but with the footage that I recorded. Because everything that I shot this day was corrupt. Yeah, it was pretty devastating to find out that an entire day's worth of footage was gone. So I was able to do a little hacky IT magic and get it back to a point, but I've lost all the audio associated with it, and it's kind of grainy and gross. So we're just gonna deal with it and it will all be okay. Now the first thing to take care of before I could put on my legs was trimming up the edges of my shelves because I left all these pieces just a little proud. With those all trimmed up flush, I could lay out my legs, and it was time to get them chopped down, squared up, and I decided to cut in some tenons. I figured since I wanted my legs floating in between the shelves and not have the shelf floating in the legs, if that makes sense. So with my tenon cut, the next thing I could do is square up my leg on my shelf and figure out where I needed to cut in my mortise. Now I know there's a lot of ways to do this and probably to do this better, but I didn't feel like it. So I just made some quick little MDF jigs, and I used a shallow flush trim router bit to cut out my mortises. Super simple, super simple. Now the only problem doing it this way is the mortise had a bit of a radiused corner. So to fix that, I just took a bearing of the same radius, marked out my tenons, and filed them down to size. Doesn't need to be fancy, because it's for me. If it was for a client, it would be fancy. But I'm not fancy. I'm just practical. So with my 16 mortises all cut out, it was a new day, and my camera started to cooperate with me again. So no more corrupt footage. I'm very happy about. So the next thing that I did was take all of my legs and round over just the inside edge. Just the inside. It's very, very important that you only do the inside. Trust me, you'll find out why later. All right, so with all those rounded over, next thing to do is a little sanding. Gonna hit some 150 on these inside edges, because we're just doing the insides and then the tops. So, you know, sanding. That's right, just sanding the insides. Again, you'll find out very soon. Some of you might have already figured out why, but don't ruin the surprise, okay? Also, if you're looking to get your hands on some awesome SurfPrep sanders or sanding pads and squishy foam pads and all these amazing things, check out the link down below and get yourself some SurfPrep stuff, because it's awesome. So with everything all sanded up, well, the insides, remember? Just the insides. All sanded up, I test fit it all together one more time, and it was time to assemble it with the glue. The glue up for this was pretty simple. I squirted some glue into the mortise hole and smeared it all around the tenon. And then I just put the protruding thing into the hole. It's pretty simple, kind of basic human operation. So that's all I did. And after I did that 8 times, I was able to clamp it all up, clean up the squeeze out, and let it dry.
Perfect. Square.
Once the first tier had cured, the next thing to do was assemble the second tier in the same way as the first. Kind of like repetition, you know? I got better at it the second time, I think. Definitely better. Improvement. That's what that's called, guys. Improvement. So with all the glue dried and cured, next thing to do was clean up that squeeze out that I didn't clean up before, because, you know, squeeze out. So between my handy dandy chisel and my SurfPrep sander, got that taken care of pretty quickly. And the next thing to do was round over all of my outside edges. Remember how I didn't do them before? Yeah, it's time to do them now when it's all assembled. So with all those edges taken care of, the next thing to do was give it one more sand, this time by hand. Actually used one of the squishy interface pads for my SurfPrep sander, and it just made it so I could get a nice little radius as I was doing this hand sanding. Highly recommend. Now the last thing to do before I put on some finish is put my brand into this piece. I was gonna put it into my laser and put my logo in all nice and fancy, but it's too big, and I built it before I remembered that I should have put some of it into my laser. So how it is. Just gonna brand it, you know? It's all good. Now at this point, everything's all assembled and looking good. I'm actually loving the way that this is coming out. And the last thing to do is throw a few coats of finish on top. So since this is a side table, it's gonna take a lot of abuse. So I wanted a nice, sturdy, hard varnish on top. And I decided to go with TotalBoat's Halcyon finish for this. I think it's gonna be just the perfect way to seal and protect this wood and also bring out all of the character in this lovely Brazilian hickory. So this is the first time that I'm using this finish, so I definitely wanted to obey the instructions. So I built up a couple layers of gloss. I let that sit overnight for like 12, 16 hours so I could come back and give it a little scuff sand, and then I could put on my top coat of satin because I didn't want a glossy sheen.
Satin.
So with my bag of satin finish all properly massaged, literally, as per the instructions on the back, it says to massage the bag. So I had no choice. So if you're looking to try out this finish by TotalBoat or any of their products, check out the link down in the description and you can save yourself a little bit of money and get yourself some boatle tote for all your total boating boatle needs. So with this final top coat applied, I didn't know how long I should leave it to cure, so I left it about a week. And now it was time for the big reveal. Much better. Thanks for checking out this video, and we'll see you on the next one.